Let's get going. We are, Rabbi Isai, on DAF YOMI Aleph, and I think it's just important to review the basic machlokes of today's daf. It's between Rebbe, or Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and Reb Shimon ben Elazar. And the machlokes is, if a Kohen did kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, which means he sanctified his hands and feet by washing them with the water of the kior. Now, this is not just a regular netilas yadayim. When you think of the kior, think of the washing sink by the kotel. It's a circular sink. It's made out of metal, brass, not like the one by the kotel, but it's all, they've got spouts all around, and the Kohanim wash their hands and feet. The water is sanctified in a kli shares, in a ministering vessel, which is itself the kior, this laver. They cannot do the avoda without this sanctification of their hands. And the machlokes is, how long does that sanctification of their hands last? Does it only last for that period of avoda, through the day and the following night? That's the opinion of Rebbe. Rebbe says that once the morning of the new day arrives, even if the Kohanim were awake all night and they stayed in the Beis HaMikdash the whole time, they have to re-sanctify their hands with a new washing. And Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, no, as long as there was no hesech hadas, there was no interruption of thought or presence, then they can go theoretically for days with just that one hand washing and can continue doing the avoda for the following day. Okay?
What if they touch certain things?
We're not talking about that. We're going to get to that in today's stuff. But just as far as we know, that's the basic machlokes, whether kiddush yadayim v'raglayim becomes disqualified through what's called lina. Lina is when it goes through an entire night and into the next day. Usually sacrificial items become disqualified. But does the hand washing itself become disqualified or not? Rebbe says it's disqualified, you need a new hand washing, and Reb Shimon ben Elazar says you do not.
Does the water come directly from the kior and go into a vessel?
It comes directly from the kior. It's like from a spout in the kior.
Oh.
Let's take a look now on Daf Chaf. Second line. Ki asa Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan, boy ilfer. So Rav Dimi says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that Ilfa asked the following question. Ledivrei ha'omer ein lina mo'elis b'kiddush yadayim v'raglayim me kior mahu sheyipaslu. So if you hold, like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says that you don't need to wash your hands anew because there's no such thing as lina with washed hands, what about the water itself in the kior? If the water in the kior itself is left overnight, does it become puzzle? Does it become disqualified or not? So mi amrinan hani lamai lekiddush yadayim v'raglayim kiddush yadayim v'raglayim gufayu lo puzzle behulina o dilma kaven de kiddush de kaddish lahu bichli shares mifsali. The two sides of the coin are as follows. According to Shimon ben Elazar, just the hands themselves are not disqualified through going overnight. So therefore, the water which is used to wash those hands has the same status as the hands. Just like the hands are not disqualified, the water is also not disqualified. Or perhaps you could argue, a guy's washed hands are not an item that is sanctified in a ministering vessel. It's his own hands, so that's why they don't become disqualified. But water that is in a kli shares does become disqualified by staying overnight. Those are the two sides of the coin. Ki asa Rabin, Amar Reb Yirmiyah, Amar Reb Ami, Amar Reb Yechanan, Hadar Pashat Ilfa ki machlokes bezu kach machlokes bezu. So all of these Amoraim say in the name of Rabbi Ami, who says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that even though Ilfa had originally asked this as a question, he said definitively afterwards that the two issues are parallel. Just like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar holds that the hands are not disqualified through lina, you don't have to wash them again in the morning. Similarly, the water does not become disqualified through lina. You don't have to the water is not contaminated, it's fine. So Amar Lafan of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna. So when Rabin says this, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna says, Rebbe ata omer kain. Rebbe, I don't know how you can say that, because Hachi Amar Reb Ami Amar Reb Yochanan Mishmei de Ilfa, because the same Rebbe Ami that you had quoted before, speaking in the name of Reb Yochanan, had also stated separately in the name of Ilfa that Keyor Shelo Shako Mi Be'erev Mekadesh Mimenu La'avodas Laila Ulamachar Eno Mekadesh. That Ilfa was quoted as saying that if the laver had not been immersed in the evening. Now let me explain to you what it means to be immersed. The laver was a ministering vessel that was not attached to the ground. But it was very large, but still was not attached to the ground.
The kior?
The kior was not
the
laver, yeah. And there was a pulley system that was invented for the Second Temple. That what they would do is that if you have this whole tank of water and you don't want it to be disqualified by leaving it out overnight, they would use a pulley to hoist it and lower it into the aqueduct that was running through the center of the temple courtyard. And in that way, because it was part of a body of water and not removed from the water, it was considered to be part of the ground, and therefore the water was not disqualified. And in the morning, they would hoist it out of the aqueduct and put it back in its place. And this way, they didn't have to constantly spill out the water every night. They could use the water from the previous day. So if you have a kior shaloshiko mi ba'erev, mekadesh mimenu la'avodas laila, ulamachar eno mekadesh. That Ilfa had said that what if the kior is not hoisted into the aqueduct and is left overnight? So the Kohanim who are continuing in that evening, let's say a Kohen just came on duty and it's evening time, and he wants to continue stoking the entrails of the animal to continue to allow them to burn through the night. So he can wash with that water, but anyone who comes in the next morning and wants to do the avoda cannot use that water. That water is pasal belina, apparently. V'havinan balamachar ena mekadesh lo tzarech lekedusha, o dilma ifsalu belina v'lo pashit lan, umar kapasha le mivshat. So the question was asked of Ilfa. We asked him, excuse me, when you say that a Kohen does not have the ability to wash his hands in the morning when he wants to do the avoda from that water, is it because you're talking about a Kohen who's been working through the night and therefore doesn't need to wash his hands? Or are you making reference that the water is not usable? So which one do you mean? And Ilfa was not able to answer the question. So I don't understand, or at least it seems that we're quoting Ilfa. It could be that we're quoting Rabbi Yochanan, or it could be that we're quoting Rabbi Ami. In other words, that's the way Rashi learns, that we're quoting Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami was asked, according to Ilfa, when the statement was made that the Kohanim do not wash their hands from that laver in the morning, is it because they don't need to wash their hands? Because we hold like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says that the hands that were washed previously, the previous day, do not have to be rewashed in the morning? Or are you suggesting that the water cannot be used because the water has become disqualified? And there was no answer to that question. Rabbi Ami didn't answer that question. So the challenge that is being presented at this point is, how can you definitively say that Ilfa said, Ke machlokes bezu, kach machlokes bezu, that the same machlokes that applies between Rav Shimon ben Elazar by the hands applies by the water of the laver? It seems that even if you hold like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, it's still ambiguous as to whether the water itself is disqualified or not. So the Gemara doesn't answer this question. It just says that basically this is one Talmud, is I'm surprised that you are so able to unequivocally state that according to Ilfa, K'machlokas bezu, kach machlokas bezu, that the machlokas is parallel. Because it seems from this whole exchange that there was still some ambiguity left over as far as the status of the water, according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. But in any event, we continue. Tashma, ben katin asa shnemasar dad lekior. We're still trying to answer this question. What's the status of the water? Is the water disqualified through laying out overnight or not? Now, according to Rebbe, the water is certainly disqualified because he holds that the hands are disqualified. But the question still is, according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says that the hands are not disqualified, what's the status of the water in the laver? So look at the following brisa. Ben Katin asa shnemasar dad lekior. So this inventor, Ben Katin, created a laver that had 12 spouts. That's why I said imagine the circular sink at the kotel, sort of like your model. Even though it's not exactly the same, right? But that's what it sort of looked like as far as the different spouts. And beforehand, apparently there was only one spout that you could wash from. Ben Katin was it was an innovator, and he said, let me economize on the hand washing. So he created 12 spouts. Yiddish cup. Afu asa muchni lekior shelo yu meimav nifsalin belina. And he was the one who also invented the pulley hoist so that the water would not become pasul belina. Now, this brisa clearly holds that the water does become disqualified if it's left out overnight. So, my lav Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon he, lo Rebbe. So the Gemara says, doesn't this seem to be going according to everyone, including Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon? So the Gemara says, not necessarily. Maybe this whole brisa only goes according to Rebbe, but according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, the water is not disqualified. But wait a minute, V'hamid dereisha Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, seifa nami Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. But wait a minute, says the Gemara. The second part of that self-same brisa is Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, as I'll prove in a moment. So therefore, the first part also seems to have to be Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. The Ketani Reisha, let's take a look at the first part. Sorry, I meant the first part. It goes like Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Let's look at the first part of that brisa. Balo eitzel paro, uparo haya omed ben ha'ulam v'la mizbeach, rosho l'daram upanav l'marav, v'ha'kohen omed b'mizrach upanav l'marav. Now, this brisa is describing the Yom Kippur Avoda. And it tells us that the Kohen Gadol had to bring a sin offering, a chatas, on behalf of his own sins, and behalf of his fellow Kohanim. And it tells us, where did he position this living animal at the time of slaughter? So first, let's clarify, where are you supposed to slaughter a chatas?
On the north.
On the north, thank you. How do you know that, Gershon? Because it says so in the Torah. That's all you had to say. Yeah, okay. It was a trick question. It says you shall slaughter it on the northern flank of the temple courtyard. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so we would require the Kohen Gadol to slaughter this on the northern flank, but that's not what the brisa says. The brisa says that he would position the animal with its body facing south and its head facing westward. So he would tilt the head so that it's facing westward towards the Holy of Holies, towards the Heichal, okay? And the Kohen would stand behind the animal on the east, to the east of the animal, between the animal and the altar. And that's how you position it for the slaughter. Okay. Now, man shamas le domer ben hulam v'la mizbeach tzafon Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. So now the question is, who holds that that's considered to be part of the north? The only Tana who holds that that's part of the north is Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. And how do I know that? So we're trying to prove that Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is the author of this brisa. So we're saying that he's the only one who would say that it's acceptable to slaughter the animal there. And how do I know that? Take a look at the following brisa. The Tanya, Ezehu tzafon, Mikir mizbeach tzfoni vad kosel azar tzfoni, chne kol mizbeach kulot tzafon, divrei Reb Yossi b'Reb Yehuda. The first opinion of the brisa is the brisa undertakes the question, what is considered north? Right? Gershon says it's got to be in the north. So what is considered north? So the first opinion is the most restrictive, and that's the opinion of Reb Yossi b'Reb Yehuda. He says that, remember, when you are coming into the Beis HaMikdash, what direction are you facing? West. So where is north? It's to your right. It's your other left. Your right. It's to your right, right? Because remember, just think about it. West, north, right? So
Rashi has a picture.
So Rashi has a picture. I'm not sure how, you definitely you can see from the picture, at least as in my Gemara, that you see Tzafon is to your right. Now, the first opinion, Rabbi Yossi b'Reb Yehuda says, draw imaginary parallel lines on the west side of the Mizbeach and the east side of the Mizbeach all the way to the northern wall. Right? Draw imaginary lines. and that's considered to be north. That's the only place where you're allowed to slaughter the animal that's a chatas. Okay? And Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon Mosif, af bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says, I hold that not only is that called north, but also any area, if you draw an imaginary line between the north and the south of the mizbeach, going up to the heichal, draw an imaginary line that connects those two, and that's also called north. And when the Torah says north, it just means don't do it anywhere south of that. But it could be parallel to the Mizbeach, between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, and the antechamber. And Rebbe Mosif, and Rebbe adds a third opinion, which is Af Makom Drisas Raglei HaKohanim, Umakom Drisas Raglei Yisrael. Right? He says that while I agree that it has to be to the north side of the altar, but it's not confined to those parallel imaginary lines that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda indicated, but rather it could even be east of there, even at the place where the Kohanim and the Yisraelim are allowed to commonly step. So he holds it, he's very liberal, it could be further east of there. Okay, Aval mina chalifos v'lifnim hakol modim shapasel. But everyone agrees that from the chalifos, which are cubbies, that are behind the antechamber of the Heichal, there I agree that everyone agrees that you cannot slaughter there because that's not in the presence of the altar. Those cubbies, you have to walk around the walls of the ulam in order to get to those cubbies. So if you were to slaughter the animal there, that would not be by the flank of the altar, and that would not be okay. So the Gemara basically says, if this brisa is advocating, like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, that you can slaughter the chatas in front of the altar, between the altar and the ulam, the brisa therefore must go according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. How can you therefore say that it only goes according to Rebbe? So the Gemara answers, V'tisper Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon he v'lo Rebbe, hashta Rebbe ad Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Mosif, ad Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon lo Mosif. So 1 second, says the Gemara, you got it all wrong. Who is the most liberal opinion as to where north is? Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is more liberal than Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda, but Rebbe is even more liberal than Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. He holds that not only are you not confined to those two imaginary parallel lines between the altar and the northern wall, he says you can even go east of there as well in the northern flank, but he's also liberal. He admits to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon that anywhere between the Mizbeach and the Ulam is also considered north. So you can't tell me that just because the Kohen Gadol slaughters it in between the altar and the Ulam, it's going only according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. It could also be going according to Rebbe. So it could be that this entire brisa is only according to Rebbe, who says the water is pasal belina, and that's why you need this muchni, this hoist system. But according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, maybe you don't need it. But the Gemara says no. Anan hachi kamrina. Isal kadaitach Rebbehi lukma b'makom drisus raglei kohanim uv'makom drisus raglei Yisrael. So my argument, though, is this. Why does the brisa require that the Kohen Gadol slaughter the bull between the altar and the ulam and the antechamber? According to Rebbe, he could slaughter it all much further east, where even the non-Kohanim are allowed to stand. Elamai, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, lukma mikir mizbech tzafoni ad kosel azaret tzafoni. But if you're saying that it goes according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, he agrees also that to Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda that you could slaughter it not only between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, but also between the Mizbeach and the northern wall. So why does the Brisa Dafka require it, according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, or according to anyone, Dafka between the Mizbeach and the Ulam? So Elamai Yislach Lamemar Mishum Chulsha de Kohen Gadol, Lachanami Mishum Chulsha de Kohen Gadol. So you must conclude that this requirement to slaughter it between the Ulam and the Mizbeach is not because that's the only place which is considered north, but rather it could be that this brisa goes according to Rebbe, who says there are other places that are considered north, even east of the altar. However, why do we dafka want the Kohen Gadol to slaughter it between the Mizbeach and the Ulam? Because of fatigue. Because the Kohen Gadol has so much work to do, we want to minimize his exertion and where all of the places where he has to walk over the course of Yom Kippur. What?
Less walking.
Less walking. And therefore, we tell him, slaughter it closest to the ulam, because you're going to have to go into the ulam and the heichel anyway in a few minutes to sprinkle the blood. So therefore, that's where you should slaughter it. But you can't infer from that brisa that it dafka goes according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. It could go according to Rebbe. And so therefore, we have no indication from here as far as what Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon would hold by the water itself. Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Let's go weiter. Kidesh yada v'raglav l'trumas hadeshen lemachar eno tzarech lekadesh shekvar kidesh mitchilas avoda. So Rabbi Yochanan makes an independent statement, and he says, the Kohen who's in charge of doing Trumas Hadeshen wakes up in the pre-dawn hours. Now, what is Trumas Hadeshen? It is the very first thing that's done at the beginning of the day, even before the sun comes up. And that is, he takes a scoop, scoops some ash from the top of the altar, and places it on the ramp that's on the side of the altar, sort of as a reminder of yesterday's avoda. It's a very good idea. In other words, there must be some kind of lesson that is being provided by placing the ash so that we can all see what was done yesterday. And then, after he finishes that, that sort of is the trigger to allow us to begin the avoda of the day. Other Kohanim will come and they'll sweep out the remaining ash and accumulate it into a pile. There's something called the tapuach, which is a pile of ash that remains from yesterday's avoda in the center of the altar together with the new firewood. And so, if he washes his hands, he does not have to rewash his hands once the sun comes up. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Even though he's starting in the pre-dawn hours, he does not have to rewash his hands from the laver, even though the sun has come up in the interim. Now, the Gemara now asks, Leman.
Machar seems to imply that pre-sunrise is yesterday.
Correct. That's normally how you and I hold also. You can daven Ma'ariv up until, technically up until dawn. And that's why you can't daven Shacharis before the dawn. So that's the point. Now hold on a second, Martin. We'll see. So Laman, Rebbe ha'amar pasla lina, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon ha'amar ein sarach lekadesh afilu mikan v'ad asara yamim. So the question is, according to whom is Rabbi Yochanan subscribing? If he's subscribing to Rebbe, so then why do you not have to rewash your hands? According to Rebbe, what you did in the pre-dawn hours, you have to sort of reset once you get to the morning, and you'd have to rewash your hands. And according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, what's the chiddush that you don't have to rewash your hands just because you washed them in the pre-dawn hours? Even if you had washed them 10 days ago, you wouldn't have to rewash your hands, according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, as long as you stayed in the temple. So Amar Abaye la'olam l'Rebbe, v'lina d'Rabbanan hi, umodi d'mikaros ha'gever v'yad safra lo pasla lina. So Abaye says Rabbi Yochanan is subscribing to Rebbe. And even though Rebbe is machmir that every morning you have to rewash your hands, that's only a rabbinical requirement. So if you already washed your hands after the rooster crowed, even though it's the pre-dawn hours or the pre-morning hours, nevertheless, it's sufficient because it's part of the new day. Even though halachically the sun has not come up yet, but it's still enough of part of the new day that even Rebbe would not require you to rewash your hands.
And this has nothing to do with falling asleep or not falling asleep.
Got nothing to do with that. Rava Amar la'olam Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon hi v'ra'a Rabbi Yochanan devarav b'tchilas avoda v'lo b'sof avoda. So Rava says, I disagree. According to Rebbe, I hold that you would have to rewash your hands, even if you washed your hands before morning. However, this goes according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. And what Rabbi Yochanan is basically doing is he's being machmir on Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon's shita. Really, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon holds that no matter when you washed your hands, as long as you never left the temple, you don't have to rewash your hands. But I hold that that's only true if you wash your hands before you do b'tchilas avoda, at the beginning of an avoda. In other words, if you continue doing avoda after you wash your hands. However, below b'sof avoda, but at the end. But if you're washing at the end of the evening, right, then it doesn't count. In other words, I hold that if you wash your hands during the day, then you can keep on going without any cessation. But if you're washing your hands at night, at the end of the night, then I hold that I'm machmir on Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon shita, and I hold that you have to wash your hands I'm sorry. Excuse me. Let me just modify. If you're washing your hands at the beginning of avoda, like you're doing now, right? So then you can commence. So you're washing your hands at the beginning of the day, even though it's in the middle of the night. So you can keep on going. But if you wash your hands after the day's avoda is finished, and now you want to start anew for the next day, then I hold that you have to be machmir, even according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. So basically, that's the differences. That's why Rabbi Yochanan uses this unique case. Since you're washing to prepare for a forthcoming avoda of the new day, so even though it was done in the pre-morning hours, it still counts. But if you were to wash your hands at the end of the day, then I would not permit it. So meisvei, let's raise a contradiction. Ra'uhu echav hakohanim shiyorad ve'hin ratzu ubo umiru v'kidshi yudeim v'ragleim min hakior. So as soon as this brisa now tells me that as soon as the Kohen in charge of the Trumas Hadeshen finishes his work, the other Kohanim would see that he's finished his Trumas Hadeshen, and they would come and immediately wash their hands from the kior. So the Gemara now says, Bishlam alei Abaye Dumukim la Kerebi Umodi Rebi Demikros Hagever Atzafar Lo Paslalina Hamani Rebi. So if you subscribe to Abaye's explanation that Rabbi Yochanan was going according to Rebbe, all this Bryce is indicating is that just like the Kohen in charge of the Trumas Hadeshen was permitted to wash his hands before the morning, since he was preparing for that day's new service, so too the other Kohanim would also be permitted to wash their hands as well. So, right, okay, but Ela l'Rava demukim la keReb Elazar b'Reb Shimon avola Rebbe mikros hagever at safra paslalina. But according to Rava, who says that Rabbi Yochanan's statement goes only according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, but according to Rebbe, if the crow makes his noise, if the crow crows, if the rooster crows rather, but it's still in the pre-morning hours, Rebbe would say that hand washing is no good. Hamani, then who does this brisa go according to? I Rebbe paslalina. What gives those other Kohanim the right to wash their hands? It's in the pre-morning hours. And I Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, ha'amar afilu mikan v'ad asara yomim ein tzarich lekadesh. And according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, if these Kohanim had already been previously working the day before, why would they need to re-wash their hands? In other words, according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, as long as you wash your hands in advance of the day's avoda, you could continue going for another 10 days. So why does this brisa require them to rewash their hands? So the Gemara answers, La'olam k'Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon v'hacha b'mayaskinan b'kohani chadati. So the Gemara answers, this brisa goes according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon. But when it says that the Kohanim wash their hands, it's talking about not Kohanim that had been present from the previous day, but it's talking about Kohanim who had a good night's sleep, and they punched in their work cards for the new day. This is now a new shift of Kohanim. And therefore, that's why they wash their hands. And according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, it's perfectly acceptable for them to wash their hands in the pre-morning hours. It's not a problem. But, so that's the conclusion of the Gemara, that we have no resolution on this issue of Rabbi Yochanan. It remains a machlokas Abaye and Rava as to whether this Rabbi Yochanan's statement goes according to Rebbe or goes according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon. Now, Ibayilu, let's continue. Yitzia mahu shetol b'kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So the next question is, what if a Kohen walks out of the temple after he's washed his hands in the morning? Does he have to rewash his hands upon re-entry? He goes out for a cigarette. Does he have to come back in? No, not really a cigarette. Maybe.
I think he can light up.
Goes out for a falafel. Very good. Goes out for a falafel. Okay.
He's eating.
Okay. Well, listen, he's got to Kohanim got to eat, So, okay. So, does he have to re-sanctify his hands for the kiyur or not? Im tim salomar lina lo paslu lo parsha vo yitzia de parsha suchi mesach daite odil makeven de biot lachsor lo mesach. So we're going even according to Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, who says that you don't have to rewash your hands as long as you stay in the temple. That could be because there's been no hesech hadas, which is an interruption of thought. you're fully immersed and concentrated on temple service as long as you're in the temple. So therefore, I could understand why Rabbi Elazar Shimon says you don't have to rewash your hands, even for several days. But it could be that he would agree that if you go outside where there is a hesach hadas, maybe there's an interruption of focus, so then maybe you do have to rewash your hands.
Is there a problem with washing if there's a suffix? I mean, and if there's a doubt, we don't say doubt as we say.
That's an interesting question. Is a Kohen allowed to re-sanctify his hands out of doubt? It seems we haven't yet seen a prohibition of doing that, and it could be that misafik maybe you would, but the Gemara's question is, does he need to? Does he need to or not? So Toshma, kidesh yoda viragla v'nitvu matbilon ve'in sarach lekadesh yatsu harehin biktushasa. So let's look at the following brisa. If a Kohen sanctified by washing his hands in the kior, and then they become tameh. Now, how do your hands become tameh? There's a rabbinic form of tumah that does not render your entire body tameh, but only renders your hands tameh. So, for example, the reason why we wash our hands today before eating bread is because we imitate the Kohanim who would wash their hands in the kior, not only for the purposes of doing the avoda, but also to sanctify their hands from any tumah. The rabbis decreed tumah on certain things. For example, they decreed that if you touch truma, your hands become tameh, and you have to rewash your hands before engaging.
Stam yadayim means all the shniyos.
Stam yadayim shnios l'tumahin. That's exactly right. So if a person's hands are tameh, so the Brisa says, if after you did kiddush yadayim v'raglaim, after you washed your hands in the kior, your hands become tameh because you touched something. Let's say you touched meiser, you touched something that renders your hands tameh. You touched the Sefer Torah, right? You rendered your hands become tameh. So matbilan ve'ein sarach lekadesh. You don't have to rewash them in the kior. All you have to do is dip your hands, let's say, in the aqueduct to re-purify them, and they're fine. But yatsu harehin bikdushasam. If your hands go outside the temple, they retain their kedusha, and you don't have to wash them at all. So yatsu yadav. So the Gemara says, don't you see from there that if the hands go outside the temple, you don't have to re-sanctify them? So the Gemara says, no. Yatsu yadav lo kami bailan, ki mi bailan yatsu kol gufo mai. Because maybe that Bryce is only talking about where the Kohen's body is standing inside the temple and he just sticks his hands outside the door. But we're talking about where he puts his whole body outside the temple. Maybe there is a requirement. So Tashma, let's look at another Bryce. Shelo rachutz yadayim v'raglayim. So the Bryce here is talking about a deficiency in not properly washing your hands. And it describes as follows. Bichle sharis bifnim. So you have to always wash your hands with the kior and inside the temple. Kidesh bichli shares bachutz o bichli chol bifnim. So therefore, if you miss one of those, so let's say you sanctified with a ministering vessel by washing your hands with a ministering vessel, but it was done outside the temple. Or let's say you took a mundane vessel and poured water from there onto your hands inside the temple. O shetavel b'mei ma'ara va'avad. Avodaso pesula. Or you stuck your hands in an aqueduct without actually washing them from a ministering vessel, and then you do the avoda. The avoda is pasul, it has to be redone. So taima de kidesh b'chli shares b'chutz, ha-kidesh b'fnim v'yatza avodaso ksher. So what we want to try and infer from here is that the only reason why your hands are no good is because you wash them initially outside. But it sounds like that if you wash them initially inside with a kli shares and then you just put yourself outside afterwards, that would not be a problem. So the Gemara says no. Dilma kidesh b'chli shares b'chutz heichidami kagon da'afik yadav labar v'kidesh avol yatsa kol gufo tiboilach. So the Gemara says maybe that's not the correct inference. Maybe what the Brisa is saying is that if you're standing in the temple and you stuck your hands outside the temple and washed them there, that's what's no good. The implication being is that as long as you washed your hands inside and you stuck your hands outside afterwards, your hands do not have to be rewashed. But it says nothing about a case in that brisa. It reflects not at all on a case where your whole body goes outside, and therefore you can't infer anything from there. So let's look at the next brisa. Amalei Rav Zvidla Rav Papa Toshma. Yatsa chutz lemechitzas chomas ha'azara. Im lishos ton tevila. Im lefisha ton kiddush adayim v'raglayim. Look at this brisa. It says that if a person leaves the walls of the courtyard, if he tarries and stays there for an extended period of time, he has to go to mikveh all over again. And he has to immerse his whole body. But if he only stays out temporarily, then he doesn't have to go to mikveh again, but he still has to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So doesn't that indicate that as soon as you leave the temple, you have to re-sanctify in the kior? So Amar lei hacha b'mayaskina kagon sheyatzel lahasech ragel v'lahatul mayim. No, you got it wrong. That brisa is not talking about just when you go out for a shawarma. It's talking about when you go out to relieve yourself, either number 2 or number 1. In those cases, there, taka, we agree that if you go out for number 2, you have to toivel yourself all over again. If you only go out for number 1, which is considered to be for a shorter time span, so then you only have to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. But it says nothing about when a person did not relieve himself. But wait a minute. But one second. The brisa had already said in the previous section that very same thing. It said that if you go out for number 2, you have to re-toivel, and if you go out for number 1, you have to rewash in the kior. So you're telling me that it's repeating itself? So the Gemara says, taka, yeah, tani v'hadar mefaresh. You find that sometimes. It'll speak in terse terms at the beginning, and then it'll go into a much more detailed explanation. Okay, Toshma. Para, Rabbi Chia bar Yosef Amar Mekadesh b'chli sharis b'fnim v'yotze. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu b'chutz v'afilu b'chli chol v'afilu b'mekeder shel cheres. Look at the following machlokas from these early Amoraim. Rabbi Chia says that the Kohen who's in charge of preparing the para aduma. Now, what is the law about preparing the para aduma? We take a red cow, and outside the temple, on Har Hazesim, overlooking the temple, he slaughters the cow, burns the cow into ash, and then we take the ashes and we mix it with the water in the temple. So the whole process of burning the cow is done outside the temple. Before you do that, Rabbi Chia holds you have to the Kohen has to wash his hands in the kior. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees, and he says he can wash his hands outside the temple, even with a cheap earthenware vessel. It doesn't have to be with the water of the kior. So Amar Rav Papa, so what are we trying to infer? At least from Rabbi Chia's statement, we're inferring that if he holds you got to sanctify your hands in the kior, but then you're going outside, so then obviously going outside does not disqualify the hand washing. So the Gemara says no. Amar Rav Papa, shiny para hol b'chol ma'aseh b'chutz lo pasla ba yitzia. It could be that para aduma is a special case, because since the whole service is done outside, therefore going outside after washing your hands in the kior does not disqualify. So ihachi lama li demekadesh ke'ein avodas penim. So the Gemara says, well then, if the whole service is being done outside, then what's the point of washing them in the kior in the first place? If you're telling me basically that kior washing is only really, the mainstay of it is for doing avoda, of sacrificial service inside the temple, and that's the only time it counts, and if you do it, and if you really taka, you go outside afterwards, you have to rewash, then what's the whole point of washing in the kior in the first place? So the Gemara says, it could be that you do it because you want to try and emulate temple service in any way that you can. In other words, it could taka be that washing in the kior then going outside really doesn't have any, it really it does disqualify the washing. But we still require you to emulate temple service in any way possible. So, Ibayalu, Tuma Ma'u Shetol L'Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So now our next question is, someone asked this question before, what would happen if a person's hands became tamei after he did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? Does he have to rewash his hands or not? Now, he has to rewash his hands, but the question is, does he have to rewash his hands from the kior, or can he simply just dip his hands in a mikveh? Okay. Now, im tim salomar yitzia lo pasla de gavra chazi aval hacha de gavra lo chazi asuchi mesach daite odil makeven dahadar chazi dakle velo mesach daite. The two sides of the coin are like this. Maybe you could argue that it's different. Like maybe let's say you hold that going outside does not passel the hands, right? But that's because a person is constantly focused on his hands and he knows he's going to go back in at any time. because he hasn't been contaminated at all. But here, where he's been contaminated and he knows that he needs to rectify himself, maybe that constitutes a greater hesach hadas, and therefore he won't be careful with his hands, and we would require a resanctification from the kior. So Tashma, let's look at the brisa we saw before. Kidei shada v'ragla v'nitbu matbilan ve'in tzarech lekadesh. So the brisa had said that if a person had washed his hands in the kior, and then his hands become tameh, he just has to stick his hands in the aqueduct, and that's all that's necessary. He doesn't have to re-sanctify them with the water of the kior. So the Gemara says, Nitmu yadav lo mi bailan, ki mi bailan nitmu kol gufo. So the Gemara says, you didn't understand my question. I wasn't asking you about when his hands only become tameh from a rabbinical edict. I'm talking about, let's say the guy actually touched the sheretz. He really became tameh midoraisa. His whole body is tameh. So he's got to go to mikveh, that much I know. But does he also have to rewash his hands in the kior? So the Gemara says, Kol gufo tepikle kivin de boy lamevad herav shemesh asuchi meisach daite. But one second, he's got to wait until sundown before he can resume the avoda after going to mikveh, because you can't do the avoda if you're a tvul yom, if you've just gone to the mikveh that day. So obviously you're going to have to resanctify your hands because of all of the hesach hadas, all of the interruption. So the Gemara says, no, kigon de'it mi samach l'shkia sachama. No, what would happen if 10 minutes before sunset, the Kohen touches the sheretz, and he wants to resanctify himself? So it could be, we would tell him, no, you don't have to do kiddush adayim v'raglayim from the kior. Just go to mikveh. In 10 minutes you'll be tohor, and then you could resume the avoda. So tashma. So let's try and prove it once again from the para aduma. Para Rabbi Chia Rabbi Yosef Omer Mekadesh Bichli Shareis Bifnim V'Yotze. So what do we say about the para aduma? You wash your hands according to Rabbi Chia from the water of the kior, and then you can go outside. And Rabbi Yochanan Omer Afilu B'Chutz V'Afilu B'Chlo Sheip B'Chli Chol V'Afilu B'Mekida Shel Cheretz. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you can use any mundane vessel, even a cheap earthenware vessel, to wash your hands. So the Gemara now says, now let's think about what we know about the para aduma. V'hapara de temuye metaminan lei. We know that historically in the Second Temple period there was constant friction between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And the Sadducees had an opinion that if a Kohen is a Tvul Yom, he cannot do the work of the para aduma. So in order to prove that we're not Sadducees, you know what they used to do to the Kohen who was preparing the para aduma? We would deliberately expose him to a sheretz or some other form of tumah, and then have him go to the mikveh, and then have him go out and burn the para aduma. It wasn't necessary, but we did it dafka to show that we're not Sadducees. We do that today also. We want to dafka to demonstrate that we're not Sadducees. You know how we do that? Exactly. Sholent. There's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch that says that the reason why we eat hot food Shabbos day is to actively demonstrate that we're not Sadducees, because the Sadducees held that you couldn't have hot food even if the fire was started before Shabbos. So this was a very practical issue. Now we know that the Kohen was defiled after he would wash his hands in the kior. He leaves the temple, they'd stick a sheretz in his face or whatever they would do. I don't know exactly how they would do it, right? But they would make him tameh. So doesn't that prove that even though he's already become tameh, he doesn't have to rewash his hands in the kior? So Kohen hasarif esapara, metaminan hayu hakohen hasarif esapara umatbilan oso, and then they would stick him in the mikveh. Lahotzimi liban shel stukim shahi omrim b'murave shemesh ha'isanases shmami no lo paslaba tuma. So don't we see from here that we let him wash his hands from the kior, walks outside, we stick a sheretz in his face, we shove him in the mikveh, pull him out, tell him go ahead and commence burning the para aduma. So you see that even tuma de oraisa does not require him to do a new kiddush yadayim v'raglayim in the kior. So the Gemara says, no, shiny para hold it full yom lo pasulba. Maybe I'll argue no. Maybe that's only because he's doing the para aduma, which is done outside anyway, and can be done by a tful yom. That's the reason why we don't require him to be to redo the kior stuff. But maybe when it comes to doing the avoda, where a tful yom cannot do the avoda, maybe he would have to resanctify his hands in the kior. So, but if that's the argument, that really this is a pseudo avoda, it's not a real avoda because a tvul yom can do it, and it's not like the avoda that's done in the temple, then why do you have to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim at all? So the Gemara answers Ke'ein avoda ba'ina, because we want him to emulate whatever can be, that whatever is done in the temple that he can emulate, we require him to emulate. So really, taka, the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim is not essential, but we tell him emulate whatever they do inside the temple. You should do as well. And but taka, it could be that if you're doing kiddush yadayim v'raglayim for temple service and then you become tamei, we might require you to redo the whole kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. We'll hold it here for today.